Good afternoon, everybody. Glenn McDonald, another Mainline Strength and Conditioning podcast. Today's guest is Brian McCarter. Me and Brian worked together back in the day of good old Coleman, Florida. Brian has he's been retired now for what, just about a year now, Brian?
I've been exactly 1 year and 13 days, but who's counting?
All right, so Brian's our guest today. Brian has if you don't notice, Brian has a very southern accent from Tennessee. So enjoy.
Yeehaw.
Huh?
Yeehaw.
Hey, try to speak up just a little bit, though.
How about now? Right. Can you hear me now?
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Okay.
All right, so let's Brian, tell us about how you got involved in the BOP and like where did it all start from, like high school sports and military? How did it all start?
Well, my claim to fame, basically, the way it started and everything for me was I went to high school. I was a really, really good basketball player. I started as my freshman year in high school in basketball. I was actually the first freshman to ever start for the varsity squad for the high school team. Anyway, so I did really good, but I broke my ankle in my senior year of high school. And my mom and dad, I came from just a middle-class family. Mom and dad, they couldn't afford me to go to college. Nobody in my family had ever been to college. Nobody on either side. So I wanted to be the first. So mom and dad couldn't pay for school. And obviously my athletic career was gone. So that was two strikes against me.
Yep.
My academics, I was just a B student. So I wasn't really smart enough to get an academic scholarship. So I remembered these fancy looking suits that always came to the high school cafeteria. And those suits were always Army, Navy, Air Force, or Marines. And of course, they're all trying to talk to us 16, 17-year-old kids, and they're wanting to recruit us, you know. And so anyway, I remembered, oh, okay, I can let the military pay for my college.
Well, hold on. Where? Tell everybody where you're from exactly, and explain where you're from and what it's like there.
Sure. I'm from Sevierville, Tennessee. That's East Tennessee. Matter of fact, the two most popular people, everybody's pretty much heard of Dolly Parton and myself. So that's the two most popular people. But no, I'm from the Smoky Mountains. It's the number 2 place in America to get married besides Las Vegas. There's approximately 11 million people that comes to the Smokies every year. It's a huge, huge tourist area.
Yeah.
We have everything from country music theaters to moonshine tasting, cider place to taste, different kinds of alcohol. We have all kinds of attractions. The biggest attraction is Dollywood.
Okay.
There's about 2 million people that goes to Dollywood. It's a big theme park. But we're just surrounded by mountains. It's just good quality, wholesome country folks is all that's really here. And, you know, back in our days of working at the prison, especially in Florida, everybody was trying to make fun of me, calling me a hillbilly. But what they don't realize and understand, that was the greatest thing they could ever call me. So whenever they would say, oh, you big, dumb hillbilly, I was like, thank you very much. You just made my day. That's what I am. So, yeah, so everybody that's listening on this podcast, Sevierville, Tennessee, most people hear it and they call it Pigeon Forge and Gatlinburg. That's the two big tourist spots. So everybody goes to Pigeon Forge and Gatlinburg. And so that's where I'm from.
So where are you, like Knoxville and like Chattanooga? Where
Nashville?
about?
Oh, okay.
Is it like in that same
Knoxville is, yeah, Yeah, Sevierville is exactly 50 minutes to an hour away from Knoxville. It's on the
Okay.
eastern side of Knoxville.
Right.
Chattanooga is 2 hours south. Johnson City is the fifth or sixth biggest city, and Johnson City is 2 hours north of me.
All right. So back to the recruiters. Now, how'd they suck you in?
Well, they never sucked me in because back in the day, of course, me and you're about the same age, but
Yep.
back in the day, if you weren't an athlete or a genius in the academic side of school, people that went to the military back in those days were kind of looked at as like the geeks or uh, the non-popular people, and so
Right.
I never wanted to associate with that. And back in those days, we actually were always in peacetime during the '80s and the real early '90s. Except for the first Gulf War, we were kind of in peacetime. So I never really considered the military. Um, when you're 16, 17 years old, you don't really think about patriotism. You don't really think too much about freedom. You don't really understand the sacrifices that the men and women in uniform go through on a daily basis. All you're trying to do is trying to, find the next girlfriend you can take out on Friday nights. And so the way it worked for me was, like I said, my academics wasn't good enough to go to college. My sports was taken away from me because I broke my ankle in my senior year. And so, and plus, I'm 6'3", so that's taller than the average guy. But when you're talking about college basketball, I'm considered short. So,
Okay. Sure. Yeah.
and then mom and dad couldn't afford, my school. So college was just something I wanted to do. That was a dream of mine. That was something that I felt like I needed to do to better myself. But anyway, I sucked it up, and I remembered those recruiters. So I went down to Knoxville, down to the recruiting station, and you had actually at the time you had the 5 branches. You had also the Coast Guard that was there,
Right.
and of course, I know you're a Marine, so Marines don't want to hear this, but it is the God's honest truth. But I know Marines don't want to hear this.
Hold
But
on. I already know what you're gonna say. I was gonna
what's
join the
that?
Marine Corps. I was gonna join the Marine Corps. Right.
Right, exactly. Because I know you hard chargers, you guys want to say, well, you could have went back the next day or later that day or something. So we don't want to hear it. But um, no, what happened is I actually went to the Marines recruiting station first because they're all lined up, all side by side of each other. And so I went and I pulled on the recruiter's door of the Marine Corps, and it was locked. The guy went to lunch. That's where he was at. The recruiter was out to lunch. Now, again, I know Marines don't want to hear that because you're like, well, that's an excuse. You were scared, whatever. I get it. So anyway, so he was out to lunch. So I was like, all right, let me go over here to the Army. He's the next guy in line. So I went in there to the Army recruiter. Now, their uniforms have changed a lot since then, but back then he had a really dark green pants with a lime green, like a Mountain Dew color stripe, and his uniform, his shirt was like a Mountain Dew bottle, light green, and his insignia was on his shoulder boards, and I believe he was an E6, so I think that's a staff sergeant in the Army, I believe.
Yeah.
Anyway, so my grandfather, my dad's dad, was in World War II, so I was like, all right, I can make my papaw proud, so I'll join the Army.
Yep.
So he said, what do you know about the Army? And I said, well, not a whole lot because my papaw wouldn't talk much about it, being a World War II veteran. But I'll hear what you got to say. He goes, well, no matter what kind of temperature it is, it's hot, cold, rainy, snow, sleet, we sleep outside. We're always outside. It don't matter what it is. He said, then let me tell you about an MRE. I said, what's that? He said, that stands for meals ready to eat. So he kind of went to explaining that to me, and I was like, man, I don't think I really want this, but I was trying to be real respectful to him. And of course, inside, I'm like, nope, this ain't for me. I'm a pretty boy. I don't want this. This ain't for me at all. But I was being respectful to him, and I was listening to his sales pitch. And so finally I said, well, give me a couple of days to think about it and I'll get back with you. And he's like, all right. Well, then I went over next door to the Air Force guy. Their uniforms has kind of changed over the years too, but as soon as I walked into his office, and I am not exaggerating when I say this, I was in his office maybe for 30 seconds. The reason I was in there for so quick, I looked him up and down from his shoes all the way to the top of his shirt, right, and he looked like a bus driver. And I was like, what in the world is going on here? So I just told him, I said, sir, I said, I'm wasting your time, and I know you're wasting mine. I'm just not interested. Of course, looking back now, we wish things would have changed. I mean, they call it the chair force for a reason, Well, anyway, hold on a second. Okay. No. Okay, so anyway, so I walked out of his office, and then there was a chief, which I didn't know their rank insignia back in those days, but there was a chief. He was outside smoking a cigarette, leaning up on a pole. And he said, boy, come over here for a minute. He said, I want to talk to you. So I walked over to him. He said, I see you keep going in and out of these places. What are you looking for? And I said, I want to go I want to go to college. And I know you guys can actually put me through college. He said, well, come on in here. Let me talk to you. So I went in there and sit down at his office, and he had, of course, now it's called the dress whites. Yeah. It was a short sleeve version, but he had his dress whites on, and he looked pretty sharp. I thought he looked like Popeye, but I was like, all right, this is pretty cool. So anyway, he said, have you ever had an ASVAB? I said, well, what in the world is an ASVAB? He said, well, we want to find out how smart you are for the military to find out what job you are. I said, I ain't never taken it. And he goes, well, let's take it. Well, back in those days, you actually took it right there in his office. It's a 3-hour test. And so I took it there in his office and did the best I could on it. Well, anyway, long story short, I scored a 61 on it, which for people that may not know about ASVAB scores, that's not like in a regular classroom setting of 61 that you're a fail. That's actually a decent score. It's not too high, but not way too low. So I qualified for just about all the jobs in the Navy, except for like intelligence and obviously special warfare, stuff like that. So anyway, so he said, well, what kind of job you looking for? This is what we got to offer you. So he went down the list, and he said, I said, well, I just want the easiest thing. I'm not looking to be John Wayne or Clint Eastwood. I just want the easiest job you got. I just want something to get in, get out, and go to college. He said, well, have you ever heard of what's called a boatswain's mate? I said, no, dude, I don't know nothing about the military. What's that? Yeah. So he started telling me what a boatswain's mate was. And I'm listening to his sales pitch, and I'm thinking to myself, this is the same exact thing the Army guy just said, except now I'm on a boat doing the same thing on a boat, and I can't get off on it. And I'm thinking, my goodness, man, I can't win for losing. Yeah. So I said, I'm not really interested in that because that's what the Army guy wanted me to do. He said, well, the next easiest thing probably would be called a gunner's mate. I said, well, what's a gunner's mate? He told me, he said, well, your responsibilities basically is you're going to be basically like operating the guided missile launches. Huh, that sounds kind of fun. So I just kind of push some buttons and out goes some missiles. He's like, yeah, pretty much. He said, you're going to be in charge of a lot of like underwater explosive weapons, like torpedoes, rockets, and missiles. Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, that sounds pretty fun. I can blow up stuff by pushing buttons. That sounds pretty easy. He said, yeah, kind of. He said, but you also got to clean them and you got to keep them, yeah, clean it and stuff like that. He said, now, one thing about being a gunner's mate that's pretty cool, he said it's actually one of the original 8 ratings that the Navy actually has. he said a gunner's mate actually was formed in 1794. And he said they were the ones that were shooting the cannons. And I was like, oh, yeah, because I love history. So I was like, that sounds pretty cool. So anyway, long story short, that's what I signed my contract as a gunner's mate. But you don't start out as a gunner's mate. So they sent me straight up to Great Lakes, Illinois. We call it, in the Navy, we call it Great Mistakes. And so I went in 3 days before Thanksgiving. I went in on November the 24th. And so they sent me up there. It's pitch black dark when I got there at nighttime. And step off the bus, and you got about 4 or 5 different training officers that's coming over there yelling and screaming at you. Of course, it's nothing like a DI, I'm sure, but you know, they're hollering at you, telling you what to do, and you're all confused. You don't know what's going on, and they're slinging all your stuff around, and you're having to go pick it up. Anyway, but they take us through processing, and you know, you get your shots, you get your hair cut. They show you a bunch of videos about what to expect for boot camp, and then when you actually get out on the fleet, what you kind of can expect. And so anyway, got my dip in. And so anyway, I went through 8 weeks of basic training. And as soon as you're called a recruit. And so as soon as that's an E1. And so once I become an E2 out of basic, the next thing is you're a seaman apprentice. And then once you become a seaman apprentice, then they send you to 27 weeks of your A school. And that was the A school, means like advancements, what it stands for, advancement school. So they teach you the tricks and the trades of how to become whatever. We don't call it like the Marines, the Army calls it an MOS, military occupation specialty. The Navy calls it a rating. So a gunner's mate's rating is a Bravo 320. That's our rating insignia. And so I go for 27 weeks. They train me on large caliber weapons like a 50 cal, 25 millimeter cannons. And they teach us all kinds of small arms, you know, different revolvers, different 9 millimeters. We learned how to shoot that, clean them. Basically, anything ordnance is what I basically did, per se. I was also trained on how to maintain night optical devices. Those are pretty cool. So you can see how to see at nighttime. Those are pretty cool.
Where's your A school at?
The A school, they kept me there at Great Lakes. So what's 27 and 8? That's what, 35 weeks. I was there 35 straight weeks. And of course, the fun part about those days, you know, I was there at Thanksgiving. I was there for Christmas and New Year's. We didn't go home. We just we stayed. My son, he got out of the Army back in September of 2022. But when he was going through basic, he was there for Thanksgiving and Christmas, and they actually let him go home. I got to go pick him up for Thanksgiving and Christmas vacation, and I'm thinking to myself, man, if that was me back in those days, I would have quit. I wouldn't have went back. I would have went AWOL.
Things have changed.
Oh my, yeah. And you know, nowadays they got cell phones that he was telling me one of the ways they actually get rewarded for doing good or whatever, they actually let them get on their cell phones and, you know, play on the social medias or make phone calls or whatever. Wow. We were lucky if we actually got to write a letter, you know.
I think I got 13 weeks. I think I got one phone call, which that's what everybody got in the Marine Corps. Just that one time.
Yeah. And then, well, the one phone call that we got to make out was probably the same phone call you got to make. It was a 15-second phone call. They have a little script for you to read.
Yeah, you have arrived and all that. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. And it was really funny because, you know, your mom's on the other end of the line and she's like, hello, hey, you know, she wants to try to talk the whole conversation and you're having to hang up on your mama. Makes you feel bad. But anyway, so I completed all that, and they assigned me when I got through with all my schooling and stuff. They assigned me to the CVN 70. That's the CVN, for y'all that don't know what that stands for. It stands for Carrier Vessel Nuclear, is what it stands for. And so anyway, I was assigned to the CVN 70. That's the Carl Vinson, and that's a carrier. I loved it.
Ask you, did you wear dungarees?
Yes, I sure did, and I loved it. It was my absolute favorite uniform. Most people
really?
hated it, huh?
You like that, huh?
I loved it, man. I absolutely loved it because it wasn't really blue jeans, but it was as close to a blue jean fabric and material as you could possibly get.
Yeah,
And
your little front pockets in the front there.
yep, my little front pockets. I had my light blue Navy shirt on, and I mean, man, I felt really good. I loved wearing the Dixie cap that went with it. It just, I mean, man, I felt like I was 10 feet tall and bulletproof. But that was pretty much, when you're on shift, that's pretty much the uniform of the day, because you can get it dirty, and you can get it washed up and stuff. So I really enjoyed wearing it. And, no, I had a good time, man. It was good. It was good times. I still keep up with a few of my buddies. Every now and then we'll call each other and say hey. But that was 35. No, I'm sorry, that was 33 years ago.
Yeah, right.
So after that time, you sort of lose track with a lot of people, and you just move on to the next phase. So I did my 4 years, got out, and after I got out of the military, then I enrolled into college. So finally, I was using my GI Bill. Now, I was on the Montgomery GI Bill. Now I think they call it the post 9/11, I believe.
Yeah.
And I'm not really well versed on the post 9/11, but I think that's where you can give it to your kids or your spouse or something. But for me, it was just for me to use. But I enrolled in Carson Newman College, which now it's called Carson Newman University. It's here in East Tennessee, in Jefferson City, Tennessee. And so I went 4 years, graduated in 1996. I have a bachelor's degree now. My bachelor's degree, it's the actual degree is called liberal studies, but I've got psychology and sociology and education as my emphasis, you might want to call it. Mm-hmm. So I was wanting to teach school as a living and coach basketball.
Right.
And so anyway, I applied, and I was getting ready to actually become a school teacher. And one of my sailor buddies, his name is Chris Sanborn. Chris called me up and he said, "Hey, before you decide to do that, let me tell you about this other organization called the Federal Bureau of Prisons." I was like, "Well, tell me about it." He goes, "Well, that's what I do for a living. I'm a correctional officer." Uh-huh. And I'm down in Miami, Florida. I was like, "Well, that's pretty cool. It's always warm down there." Well, anyway, so he told me about it. Here in East Tennessee, we really don't have a lot of federal jobs except for the post office and the Park Service. But to get those jobs, you really have to know somebody to get on. So getting a federal job here in East Tennessee, where I'm from, you don't have a lot of choices and chances, So the pay was a lot better. The advancement opportunities sound a lot better. So I was like, okay, let me give it a shot. So back in those days, you actually had to call for an application, and you had to handwrite everything. And so, sorry about that, my phone. Sorry. Yep. And so anyway, I filled it out, did the best I could on it. But in all reality, I never thought in a million years I'd get the job just because it's a federal job. So I sent it back to Washington, D.C., and they about 2 weeks later, they sent me an email. They sent me something in the mail, and they said, "Hey, we'd like to interview you." So I packed up a couple of days worth of clothes and I drove down to Miami and I met with, let's see, I think it was the psychologist, the captain, human resource,
Right.
and somebody, Glenn, I don't remember, but it was a panel of about 4 or 5
Yeah.
people. And so they asked me all these correctional questions, and I had no clue. That was not something I'd ever did before. And so, anyway, every time they would ask me a question, this is a true story. My answer was, I don't know that, but if you will send me to the academy, whatever that is, I'm sure I'll learn it at the academy, and then I'll be able to come back and give you the correct answer on it. And honestly, out of about the 8 or 9 questions that they asked me, that was my response. I had no clue. I had no idea. And of course, in my head, I'm sitting there thinking to myself, boy, I just blew this interview. I ain't got a chance.
Yeah.
And so anyway, the interview went
Brian,
20, huh?
they're probably the same. Well, actually, I know they're the same questions as when I was panel interviewed, because when I
Yeah,
was a captain, when I was lieutenant and captain, I interviewed quite a few people, right? And
yeah.
they're the exact same questions as to when I interviewed back in 1993. So nothing's
And I bet
changed.
you, yeah, and I bet you feel really funny because you probably were thinking the same thing I was thinking during my
Oh
interview. Then after you
yeah.
become a captain and you know the answers, and you're probably laughing at all the questions that they come up with.
Well, I interviewed I started as a cook foreman, remember? So mine were the food service administrator was there, a few other people. I know the captain was there, and yeah, they just kind of some correctional questions and then some food service questions. So it wasn't that bad.
Did you do like I did and just answer it the best you could, or was you kind of versed on some of the questions?
Well, some of the questions I got, and some of them I just had no idea. I can't remember right now what I would say, but I probably make some
Well,
shit
see,
up.
the reason that I told them I have no answer for that, but if you'll send me to the academy, is because I was trying to be honest. I could have made up some crap, but I figured if I made up something and just kind of winged it, then they would know I was, BSing them, and they wouldn't give me the job. So I just did the best I could. But it was really funny because the interview lasted about 20 or 25 minutes, I guess. And
Right.
as soon as I got out of there, um, the girl over human resources, she come back to me. She was chasing me out the door, and she goes, "Hey, we really enjoyed your interview." Now, I don't know if they were just laughing their asses off at me because of the way I talk, or I don't know, or either they were just desperate to hire me. I don't know what it was, but she told me, she goes, "Can you come back in 2 days and take a urinalysis so that way we can see if you got any drugs in your system?" And of course, I've been very, very blessed. I've never ever done any kind of illegal drugs, never. And so I knew that I could pass it. So I was like, yeah, sure. So I went back 2 days later and did the urinalysis, and they screened it right then and there, and they offered me the job. And so 2 weeks later, I told them I had to go back to Tennessee to gather all my stuff, and so I did, and they gave me a start date. Here I am.
Mm-hmm.
Now 23 years later, I'm retired from it.
Right. Yep. Yep. How'd you like Miami?
Miami was real fun. The city was fun. It's kind of like New York City, or maybe like Chicago where you live at. It's a city that never sleeps. Anything you want to do is there. It don't matter. No matter if it's illegal or legal, you can get
Right.
into it. Whatever's there, you can find.
Yeah.
But the cost of living is very expensive. They started me out as a GS5 step one. And here I had a college degree and military, and they started me out at $29,000 a year.
Wow.
I was paying like $1,200 or $1,300 a month for a 1-bedroom, 1-bath apartment on the 3rd floor. And that ain't counting utilities. So, I mean, when you talking about struggling, I mean, I struggled, that first year to get my probation out of the way. But
Man,
I really enjoyed Miami.
that was back in the day too. You're paying pretty good money in Miami. Back in
Oh,
what, 90? When did you start? 94, right?
'94. No, I started February of 2000.
Oh, damn. Okay. Wow. I forgot. Yeah. That's big money back then, though. 2000.
Yeah, I mean, it paid $5,000 a year more than the state of Tennessee was going to pay me to teach. The good thing about living in Florida is it's a no state income tax. So that money is all yours. Basically, I mean, you got to get federal tax, but you don't have to give it to the state.
Right.
So that's a big thing. Tennessee is a no income tax state as well.
Right. Yep.
So yeah, I
What kind
learned.
of,
It took me. I started February 27th of 2000, and I went to Glencoe in May. So I was there about 4 months before they sent me to Glencoe. And uh, I mean, I don't know how in depth you want to talk about all this, about how far you want to go into it, but I mean, I can sit and talk about everything that I went through, and it
how'd you
was,
like, how'd you like
huh?
Fletsy? How'd you like Glencoe Fletsy then? Was it kind of, I
Well, I
mean,
can,
when I went, it was kind of like, at first it was like, oh, this is going to be great going to, the federal, federal law enforcement training academy. It's
yeah, yeah,
after like the second day, it's like that this is all we're doing, standing
yeah,
around. And
yeah,
I remember I look around and watch like I mean, back then it was like INS and the U.S. Marshals, a
yeah,
little bit of everybody was there, and it was like, man, they're like out there, they're running, they're carrying logs, they're doing this, and I'm like, what, are we doing anything today? Nope, nope, we're
yep,
going in the classroom. That's it.
yeah, yeah. Um, the hardest ones that I seen, I was there with you, like the same thing, INS and marshals, the park police was there, park rangers. Um, but the hardest one that I saw was the border patrol guys.
Oh
I
yeah,
mean, those people, I mean, they were making them run to the chow hall everywhere.
yes,
And I felt sorry for those guys. I thought they were like in Marine Corps boot camp or something.
well, it should be.
But yeah, Fletsy was, in my opinion, it was probably the best 3 weeks of my whole BOP career. Um, because for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, you had a smorgasbord. You could eat as much as you wanted, go back as much as you want. It was a buffet style, and um, you know the. I mean, I don't know how much you want me to go in depth of what we did or didn't do at the academy, but yeah, you're right. I mean, there was not really any physical activity involved.
Right.
Uh, it was mainly classroom. I think probably the most that we did besides the classroom was on the firing range. I think we had a whole week, I believe, that they did just to shoot the weapons.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. Yep. Classroom, and then we
Um,
practical application. Yep.
mm-hmm.
Yeah. Do you think like I mean, you look back now and uh all the time you spent in the bureau, do you think that would change things for the bureau? Like if they like implemented like a fitness standard where you actually went to when you went to FLETC, you have to pass a real PT test, and then there'd be standards to maintain that level throughout your career.
I absolutely do.
Yeah.
You know, when you're dealing with the people that we deal with, and uh, when I started out, Miami was it's a medium, which the five different levels of custody in the BOP is the camps, then you got the low, the mediums, you got the penitentiaries, and then you got the administrative, the ADMAX or whatever that thing's called in Colorado. But um, yeah, when you deal with these kind of people, especially out of my 22 years that I worked, 19 of them was at a penitentiary. And you're dealing with people that, yeah, they're going to see daylight, but the daylight they see is on the rec yard. They're
Mhm.
never going to see freedom. At the penitentiary level, 75% of everybody you see on a daily basis, they're never getting out of prison. They're staying there. So
Right.
very, very few people actually get out of a penitentiary. And so I'm not saying you got to be in the best of shape. I'm not saying that, but I do believe that you have to have a fitness that you need to be able to run so many push-ups, so many sit-ups, because there's a lot of people there that's just not in the best of shape. And it's like in the military, or it's like in real police work. If you've got a guy, if you're a police officer and you have a routine traffic stop, yep, and you pull somebody over and you've got your uniform that's pressed, you got your buttons shined, you know, you look like you've got your stuff together, or you got a guy that just looks like he literally rolled out of bed and he's not put together. Who are you going to give the respect to? You know, you're going to give the respect to the guy that's got his stuff together, because you know he's going to be able to take care of business. Yeah. And it's the same thing in corrections. And you well know, I mean, in my career, we went through 4 different uniform changes, and there's a lot of times that you'd meet fellow staff, men and women, that they literally looked like they just rolled up out of bed, and they didn't get the respect, because in the prison life, it's all about respect. It's not about how tall or short, fat, skinny, muscular you are. It's about how are you able to talk to people. You know, how are you able to communicate yourself? And to get respect, you have to give respect. And that's what it's all about. That's what keeps you alive.
Yeah. So what kind of, at Miami, what kind of things did you see there? Because I know it's a high rise. Were you at FCI or the MCC?
I was at FCI.
Okay. Oh, okay. I thought you were at the MCC. Yeah. So what
No.
what'd you see there? Because I know they had their fair share of issues there. You know, because a lot of things went on all the time, especially in Miami area. And I actually visited that place a long time ago. I remember it didn't have a pond in the middle of it with some trees.
It sure did. Yeah. Had a big lagoon, and the north side of the lagoon, it was the administrative offices, the lieutenant's office, captain's office, SIS, stuff like that. You're on the south side of the lagoon was all of your housing units. We had 6 different housing units, and that's where the most of the inmates stayed. To the west of the lagoon was your food service, commissary, and then to the east of the lagoon was the rec yards. So the most notorious person that we had there, his name was Manuel Noriega, and he was the dictator of Panama. And the weird thing about that is, when he was arrested by DevGru, which most people know DevGru is SEAL Team 6 and the DEA, when he was arrested and prosecuted and then found guilty, he was never actually a federal inmate. He was a prisoner of war. That's how they classified him. Yep. And they gave him his own cell. He was not housed in general population. He basically was in special housing, but he was off to the side. He had his own special room. Inside the room, he had his own telephone he could use at any time. He had a computer. He was allowed, he was allowed the 3 meals that we had during the day. He was allowed to pick one special meal. So if he wanted chicken, he could have chicken, hamburgers, hot dogs, whatever he wanted. And then at nighttime, if you remember about the lagoon, you know, it's an oval shape. It's circular.
Yeah.
And so after the 12 o'clock count, if you're working morning watch, you had to go in as the compound officer. You had to go in and get him out of his cell. And all he did was he just walked around that lagoon as many laps as he could get until his hour of rec was up, and then you'd put him back up. But then whenever he had a visit, you had to stop the whole entire operations of the prison. Everything stopped. It didn't matter what's going on. And so we had to have 3 correctional officers to actually escort him on the compound and take him to visitation. And I got to strip search him, and they called him General. That was his nickname. So You know, when you're in prison, you know, most time we call inmates by the last name, but we just happened to call him General. That was his name. But he was like the most popular guy that I've ever met. But in my career, I've met a lot of characters and some popular ones too.
How was he? How was he as an inmate? Was he pretty respectful, or was he just like, always bitching and moaning?
No, he was probably the most respectful inmate that I've ever had any kind of conversation with, period. But the weird thing about him was they gave him a 40-year sentence. Now, the man was in his late 40s, early 50s when he was arrested. So basically, that's a life sentence.
Right.
However, the funny part about it is his daughter became an assistant U.S. attorney. So she had his prison sentence reduced down from 40 years to 10 years. And he'd already been there like 4 or 5 years when I got there. So he only had like 4 or 5 years left to go on his sentence. And when he got released, the rumor is, the United States didn't want him. Panama was going to kill him, and so they sent him to France. And I believe that's where he died, was in France.
No kidding. I didn't know that. I didn't realize that. Interesting.
Yep. Yep.
What else? What kind of as far as Miami, what kind of being a medium? And I know you're used to the pen life, but how'd you like any violence or anything bad go on there?
Not really. The stuff talking about, all the bad stuff, was before my time, so they kind of cleaned it up, and I guess they got a better administration in there, I guess. And yeah, I couldn't tell you the name of the warden that was there. Richard Decker was the AW, and he did old school. I was married at the time, and I had my kids then, and I wanted to get out of Miami. I wanted to go back home. So he was a cool kind of way of doing it, not this USA jobs through Grand Prairie crap, but he knew I wanted to go back home. And the closest prison to here is Manchester, Kentucky. That's about 2.5 hours north of here. So he knew I wanted to get home, so he actually pulled me out of a housing unit, got me relieved for a little bit. I went and sit down at his office, and he said, I hear you want to go back home. And I was like, yeah. He actually picked up the telephone right in front of me, called Manchester, talked to the warden there in front of me, and he's after he's talking, he's like, yep, good guy, yep, whatever. And he looked at me, he said, hey, you want to go home in about 2 months? I was like, yeah. So he told the warden, he said he'll be there on I don't remember, Glenn. I think it was May of 2001, I believe is when I got there. But
Wow.
that's old school. That's the way it should be.
That's the way, yeah. I mean, that's the way it worked. That's the better way to do things. That's for sure. Yep.
Yeah.
So you went to
yeah,
Manchester?
there was. Yeah. Manchester's also a medium, medium high. And it was the same stuff that went on at Manchester as Miami, just your basic stuff, run of the mill stuff. You know, you'd be called to a body alarm maybe 2-3 times a week. Nothing really big, nothing really bad, just your average check-ins or occasional fights,
Yeah.
just the basic stuff, because when you're at a medium, that in the Bureau of Prisons, in my opinion, that's really the best prisons to work at, because they call it a medium for a reason. If those guys really, really become stupid and they get in fights and they stab people and assault people and whatever it is, then they send them up to a penitentiary. Well, a lot of those guys came from a penitentiary, so they don't want to go back. Or if they've never been to a pen, they don't want to go.
Right.
So if they do good, sometimes their reward is to go to a low security. So, you've got a good discipline right there, where they just kind of want to stay and mind their own business.
Right. Brian, you still there? No. You froze up a little bit. There
Still
you are.
there?
Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yep.
I,
So then how was, so nothing really went on there in Manchester?
no, not really. I mean, like I said, it's just your run of the mill stuff, stuff that you see basically on an everyday thing, but nothing crazy. But I did when I was in Miami, I was a probationary guy. So you're not allowed to get on any kind of, special teams that the Bureau of Prisons gives. So I just had to get through my probation. But when I got to Manchester, I got on the disturbance control team. So I was the point man, breach man on that. And then I got on the hostage negotiation team there. So I was the reporter. That's what I did on that. And so I learned a little bit about the teams. I learned, how they kind of operate and what they kind of do. And then I tried out for the sort team, and I made it. But then by the time I was getting ready to start training with sort team, then I got transferred down to Coleman. And so that was my next duty station.
Right.
And that's where me and you met.
Right. Now that was Coleman was a different animal.
Yeah.
Was. Oh yeah.
It really is. But I had a good time at Coleman. I did 5 years at Coleman as a correctional officer. I don't know, how many podcasts you've got where people understand the ranking system of the correctional services. You know how you start as a correctional officer, then you go senior officer, and then senior officer specialist. But when me and you met, I was already a GS8 senior officer specialist, and my claim to fame down there was I was a shoe rat. I worked in shoe most of the time, except when you were on and you got me out there with you out there on the compound, which was great. I loved that. But when you weren't on shift, I was mainly down in special housing, and I finally, I can't remember if you had already left or if it was your last year or when you got transferred to the medium. I don't remember, but I finally become the OIC down there, shoe number one, and I did for a year and loved it. It was really, really fun.
Where were you?
And
where were you during something I touched on another podcast? Where were you with the McCullough incident with the homicide and everything? You remember?
Yeah, that's how I become the shoe number one.
Okay.
I really, really have to say that I was very blessed, if you want to call it that. I'm not going to put the officers' names out there because I don't know if you're supposed to do that or not, but you know who I'm talking about.
Right.
But at the time I was the shoe number two guy, and if you remember, shoe one ran everything, and they also did the front doors. Let all the
right
door, and they produced all the intakes, all that. The shoe number two guy, his job, if you remember, was just to run the grills, opening the doors and stuff. Well, when that incident happened, that was on a Monday, and I happened to have Mondays and Tuesdays off, and so I was off work the day that happened, and that particular person that was working as my replacement is the one that went down range when they weren't supposed to, because the number one and number two guys are supposed to stay behind the grill,
right,
and not go down range. But anyway, that particular person went down range for whatever reason and had the incident with McCullough. They call him Animal, was his nickname. And that's the one that met up with the shoe tower officer, the other person that was involved.
Yep.
And they did a PP10, the separate file, and found out that Animal could be put in with the other guy that was beside that did, you know, the assault, if you want to call it.
Yep.
And well, the rest is history. You know, McCullough basically, you know, killed the guy with his bare hands inside the cell. So I'm not saying that that would have been me, because hopefully I would have made better sound correctional judgment.
I think you would have. Yeah. Yep.
But I do look at it that that was a blessing for me, because I happened to be off that day that happened.
Yeah. Right. Right. Well,
I know about the incident, but you know, other than the details of what we know is factual, I really don't know much more about that, and I'll just leave it at
how'd you like what'd you see in Coleman? I mean, did you seeing all the violence that we did see? How did it affect you at all? Did you like
Oh
uh,
yeah.
apprehensive like going to work sometimes, or were you not saying like cowardly, just like kind of like, man, I just don't want to deal with this crap today, kind of thing?
That's every day. And you know, after I finally got into education, which, you know, I'll talk about that if you want me to later, but after I got into education, I was a teacher there for 15 years, and that's, you know, what I wound up doing at the end. But
Right.
I got lucky to teach the IF class. Um, I got into what's called affirmative action. So because I was a recruiter for affirmative action, they let me teach one of the IF classes. And anyway, one of the things I told them, the new recruits, I told them flat out, if you come into this prison, I don't care if it's even at the low, but if you come into this prison and you're not at least scared, I don't want to work with you. You know, we all become complacent because we've been there so long and we're so used to the way that everything runs.
Right.
But complacency will definitely get you hurt sometimes. And unfortunately, people take a lot of shortcuts. And, you know, I'll talk about one of the big shortcuts that really, really bothers me, and not now, obviously, but when I worked there, it really bothered me. And I'll talk about that if you want. But,
Yep.
Yeah. But for me, absolutely. You know, like I said, 19 of my 22 years, I was at a penitentiary, and, you know, you deal with the worst people that is imaginable. You know, you don't deal with people that takes money out of an offer plate. I mean, you're dealing with organized crime members, drug cartel members,
Correct.
motorcycle club members, murderers, rapists, you know, Ponzi schemers. I mean, whatever you think's out there, we dealt with them.
Yeah, kidnappers, everything. Yeah. Yep.
You know, I was definitely nervous, you know, but you learn to live with that fear, because you know that once you get so many years in, you're kind of stuck. You're married to the job, and you can't really get out. You're just there, you know. And I did some math real quick, and maybe it's not exactly the right math, but if you do a 20-year career in the BOP, if you add it all up, the hours that you're there, you're really actually in prison for 8 years. And, you know, that's a long time. You see more inmates than you do your own family. And so it does change you.
Yeah.
It changes everything about you.
Yeah.
It changes your mentality. It changes the way you look at people. It makes it to where when you deal with these bad people, you really don't like human beings anymore. No,
you see the worst that people can, the way people actually treat each other.
Absolutely you do.
Yeah.
But you know, one of the things that really bothered me, you know, I know you were a captain, and of course you were a lieutenant and you were an officer. You did the same things I did. But one thing that really bothered me is, you know, during ART, you got all these bigwigs up there trying to talk about the particular disciplines of everything. And then when you get the captain up there talking during ART and some lieutenants, and they're trying to tell you, oh, you got to follow policy and procedures and blah, blah, blah. And it sounds good in theory, but you know for a fact, none of that goes on. None of it.
Very little bit. Yeah.
Very little.
Yep.
But one of the big things that really bothered me when I was a correctional officer, or if I had to work overtime or mandated or whatever, it was always the 4 o'clock count. Because at the 4 o'clock count, you're supposed to be, counting each inmate, and they have to be standing up on their feet.
Yep.
And then you got somebody that follows you as the backup counter. And then you're supposed to have a third person that's down there on the floor observing to make sure everything's done right. Well, first of all, that never, ever happens. Never. It's never done that way. Now, you do have your backup counters, but you're trying everything you can to hurry and speed up that count, because if not, the operations lieutenant's going to be calling you, why in the hell ain't you done? Blah, 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 And so that always bothered me, because there has been a few times that we would be counting. Luckily, it never happened on my shift, thank God. But there was a few times that you'd find you'd do the count, and then come to find out, you start unlocking doors and there's dead people laying there.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Or there's somebody that's been assaulted. Something bad happens. And that really bothered me, because that's your not only your job and career, but that's also your freedom. Because if you wind up doing something wrong, guess what? Now you're going to prison.
Right.
So that was just one of the things that really, really bothered me about, when they try to teach you policy and procedures and doing the right thing and all that, and none of it happens. And then
a lot of it goes back to common sense, though, too. I mean, me and you worked together for almost 5 years, I think it was, and
yeah,
our common sense would dictate what to do and what not to do. And then it seems like some people just, their common sense just, they left it out in their car when they came into work, because they had no idea what the hell they were doing,
And the worst thing of it all, to me, the worst thing is the pencil whipping that goes on. I mean, it's unbelievable. And then, you put your name to a government document, and then something goes wrong, and you're going to be the first person that not only SIS and the SIA goes to, but then you got OIG and the FBI on your ass. Yep. And then you're getting in trouble.
Yeah. Yep. Why do you think you didn't promote up to a lieutenant or anything? Why do you think you didn't do that?
Well, it's this is a true story. Like I told you, I was the shoe number 1 officer for a year, and the best warden that I've ever worked for, me personally, was Mike Garrett. And he would always do his shoe rounds every Friday. And he was very, very meticulous on what he wanted done. And so I made sure to do a good job for him. I wanted to do it right. So anyway, it was about 3 months before he retired. And, everybody calls everybody by their last name. But if you'll remember, nobody ever knew me by McCarter. They just called me Country. That was my nickname. So inmates as well as staff, they called me Country. And I don't even think that Warden Garrett even knew my last name, because he always called me Country. But anyway, there was a teacher's job that was available and a lieutenant job at the same time. I put in for both of them, and I BQ'd for both jobs. So when he did his shoe rounds on a particular Friday, he come to me and he said, "Hey, Country, I see you qualified for a lieutenant and you qualified for a teacher. Since you've done a good job for me this past year, my retirement gift to you is going to be promoting you to whichever one you want. What do you want?" And I just said, "Are you serious?" And he said, "Yeah, you let me know which one you want and I'll give it to you." Without hesitation, I said, "I want to be in education." And he said, "Why is that?" And I said, "Because if I still become a lieutenant, I'm on shift work. I'm working weekends, holidays, and whatever else, and overtimes and whatever." I said, "But if I go down there to education, I get to work 4 10-hour days. I get 3 days off every week. I'm working day shift like a regular person, and I got weekends and holidays off." And I said, "Then I don't have to compete on seniority about my vacation." And he was like, "That makes a lot of sense." So literally, and I mean literally, a week later, then I got promoted to education, and that's where my educational teaching job took
Wow.
off.
Before
So
before you
basically,
before you left custody, what kind of I know you and I have been involved in pretty some serious incidents, but what as far as
yes.
incidents that you saw, what kind of you remember any serious things that you were involved in?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. The first thing at Coleman, and this is my first big one, because like I said, at Miami and Manchester, I didn't really do a whole lot. You'd respond to body alarms, but it was either over with or they're just cat scratch fever,
Right.
nothing really big. So the very first incident that was big for me was the DC blacks and the Muslims got into it, and they got. I mean, there was about 50, 55 inmates going at it at one time, and they all had homemade weapons and shanks and bone crushers and anything you can think of. They had it, and so I had just arrived to Coleman. This is before you got there, so I just got there. I was there maybe a month, maybe. And so anyway, I happened to be working the compound, and so I responded to it, and that was over next to a Kilo unit. If you remember where Kilo unit was at on the compound at Pen 1.
Yep.
And so anyway, here I am, kind of the new guy, even though I'd already had 4 years in the BOP. I'm still the new guy to that prison.
Right.
So you know how it is when you go to a new prison. It don't matter how many years you got in, you got to earn the respect of your fellow officers. And so I found the biggest black guy I could find. I mean, this guy was huge. He probably weighed 270, 280 pounds, big old boy. And I don't remember his name, but maybe either you remember his name or at least you remember who he was. Oh, his last name was Terry. He was that former Army Ranger.
Yeah,
You remember Terry?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So he was part of it. And so anyway, I jumped right on his back and took him to the ground the best way I could. And he's slinging me off like a little rag doll, but I'm hanging on for dear life. And finally, somehow or another, I got him down to the ground. And so I'm wrestling around with him, trying to cuff him up or subdue him or whatever I'm trying to do. And of course, it all happens so fast, you don't really know what's going on. The next thing I remember, I'm on the bottom, literally on the bottom of the pile with this guy. And I saw probably a 10, 11, or 12-inch shank, not going into Terry, but some other guy. And I mean, this thing was going in and out, in and out, in and out, probably 6 or 7, 8 times. And blood is just spewing everywhere on me. It's on him. It's on everybody. And of course, you got the rest of the guys doing whatever they're doing. So you talking about somebody getting scared. I'm thinking to myself, okay, I'm not going to die like this. This is not the way I'm going out. So I was like, the hell with this. I ain't going to worry about Terry no more. So I somehow or another got out of that whole entire pile. I saw some little Mexican guy standing over to the side watching. I put him on the ground, cuffed him up, and took him to the lieutenant's office. So that was my first. That was my first one. I was at the riot at Pen 1, that big riot that they had. I got mandated for overtime, so I was there during that because I was working morning watch, my regular shift, and then I got to work the 8 to 4 shift. And it took off there in the dining hall, and it was just a free for all. I mean, it was dog eat dog, and that'll make you think twice about where you're working at when you see stuff like that. People coming at you with clubs and shanks and locks in the socks, and I mean, and here, back in those days, we had no protection. I mean, nothing. All we had was just we didn't have a vest, nothing.
Nothing.
And
no OC.
So I was there. Nothing. So I was there during that. I mean, I can't tell you how many times something would kick off in the housing unit that I was a part of.
Right.
The biggest thing that I ever had to do, and not exaggerating when I say this, I mean, heck, you was there, like you said, 5 years of it, but north of 100 times, I was on the use of force teams, and I was always the point man, always. And because everybody knows, I lifted weights, and I tried to take care of my body, the best way I could, and so I was always the number one guy.
Yep.
So I mean, it just I can't remember every incident, but yeah, there was times that you're like, oh my goodness, I've seen human beings, eat their own feces, drink their own piss, smear shit all over the walls, so that way when you go in there, you're going to slip and slide in it. It's just it's crazy stuff that we see that normal people can't even comprehend what we see.
No, and you bring that up, and like, even like, somebody just asks you a story about, like, what's the worst things you've seen in prison? You tell them, you're like, no way, that didn't happen. You're like, oh yeah, it happened more than
Yeah.
once.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They don't realize it, they really don't.
Yeah. No, I've been in some very, very scary situations before, and but there's an old saying: the BOP stands for big old paycheck, and they pay you for what could happen. That's why we get paid what we get paid for, is because of the danger that we're willing to sacrifice and put our lives on the line every day for.
True. Yep. What about, so when you went over to education, how'd you like that? How'd that go?
Loved it.
Yeah,
I loved it.
totally
I loved
different
it.
world, huh? Didn't you go to
Totally.
Didn't you go to Penn too? Didn't you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Here's where it gets funny. Every federal prison, it doesn't matter what custody level, they have to have a Spanish GED teacher. And so here I am, a hillbilly from East Tennessee, talk Appalachian, country stuff, and they needed a Spanish GED teacher at Penn 2. So Phil Geisfeld was our supervisor of education, so he's the one that sent me over there. So they sent me into a classroom with about 30, 35, mainly Puerto Ricans, but different Spanish, nationalities.
Yeah.
I can't, and even today, I can't speak it. I don't understand it. I don't write it. And so you could imagine the fun that I had being a Spanish GED teacher. And for 10 years, I was the Spanish GED teacher. I taught Spanish as a second language, English as a second language, and then the regular Spanish GED. So I had to hire the best tutors that I could possibly get, and they're the one that taught the class. They're the one that spoke it. All I did was just basically give out the test, and then I graded the exams. And so that was fun, though. That was really, really fun. So obviously everybody made fun of me. I'm talking about not just inmates. I'm talking about staff alike. They're saying, here, a hillbilly gets to teach Spanish. Only in America, and only the federal government is going to hire somebody that can't even speak the language that they're taught to speak. Yeah. Then my last 5 years, we actually hired a Spanish-speaking person as the teacher. So they actually took over the Spanish GED. So then I became the English GED teacher. And so I was considered like the high school teacher, because there's different levels of education.
Sure.
So basically I had the 9th through the 12th grade guys, and I was graduating, which I'm very proud of this. I was graduating usually about 50 to 60 people a year.
Oh, that's good. Nice.
Yeah. To the regular people, the regular folks, that may not sound like a lot, but when you deal with people that can't even spell their own names,
yeah,
and then you take them from that level all the way up to getting a high school diploma, that's something. It makes you feel good. And we are also a profession that is a thankless profession. Nobody looks at us and says, hey, thank you for saving us from the community and keeping us safe. Even when we save a life, and I've had to do that, I've had to save one inmate's life before. Nobody pat you on the back, you know, in the regular community and says, hey, I know that guy killed 4 people and he's got life in prison. Thank you for saving his life. You know, even the family members of the people that he killed, I'm sure they wouldn't call me up and say, hey, man, thank you for saving that guy that killed our kids or husbands or whatever life. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
Good career.
Oh yeah, definitely, definitely. What about so Penn 2 was how was that? Was that because it was considered a penitentiary, right? Or was it like a medium more? I can't remember how that was set up.
It is a penitentiary. It's a full-fledged penitentiary. The difference is at Penn 1, they say that was an active yard. Penn 2 is supposed to be dropout or non-active yard. However, once you're in that life, you're in that life.
Oh yeah.
It just depends on do you want to go back over, you know, if you can lay down and be somewhat, and I do want to say that word, somewhat normal, you kind of do your best to not do anything stupid. But because we were at a penitentiary, I mean, we were still responding to very bad body alarms at least once a day, if not 3 or 4 times. I mean, there was murders that went on there, all kinds of activity. I mean, so just because it's a dropout yard does not mean that's really what it is. It's just classified as that.
I mean, people don't understand that even if it's a dropout yard, that, you know, they might get that one dude over there that's, hey, it's time to pay your debt, you know, kind of. They're
exactly
over that dropout yard to take care of something, you know.
Oh, absolutely. And you know, they still communicate through mail. I mean, you can have the mail room to do the best job they possibly can, but there's still ways to get stuff in. Right. You know, a lot of people ask me, they're like, you know, how come drugs was so prevalent on a prison yard? And I'm like, it's very, very simple. 2 ways. One, obviously the visitors are bringing the drugs in, but the main way was through staff members. I mean, even though they implemented a metal detector where I worked at, you know, when me and you worked together, I don't know, did they have metal detectors there when you were there or not? I don't think so.
I don't think so.
Yeah, I know they did after you left.
Yeah,
but I mean, even though you got metal detectors there, even staff members that have a criminal mentality, they know how to bring it through and get it past the front lobby officer. They know how to get it through the metal detector, you know? So people are amazed at how much drugs is actually in prison. And I tell them there's as much drugs in prison as there is out there on the streets.
Yeah, probably so. Yeah. I mean, we've seen our share of the staff bringing that crap in. It's incredible what would go on.
And you know what really amazed me, Glenn, is, you know, I can't speak for you because you were at different levels, different prisons that I was at, but the most that I ever seen somebody walked out and get arrested and get prison time for was for $2,500. Now, I mean, I don't know about you, but man, I'm not going to sit there and go to a federal prison and lose my freedom over $2,500.
Right.
It's not happening.
No.
There was a guy, and he was there at Penn 1 when you were there. I don't know if you remember him or not. He's still in prison unless he just died of natural causes, but his name is Shalom Weiss. Do you remember him?
Sounds very familiar. I think, yeah. Yep.
He was a heavy set guy. He was from the Jewish faith from New York. And supposedly he was in the real estate business, and he was doing some kind of a Ponzi scheme, and he was defrauding the U.S. government out of some kind of land up in New York City. But anyway, you know, they gave him 846 years. And I remember when I got there to Coleman, one of the first things that guy would do, he would always find out who the new transfers were. He would find out who the new staff members were. And he offered every staff member $10 million to help him escape. Now, I'm still not going to lose my freedom over $10 million, no. But at the same time, people would be lying to you if it didn't at least cross your mind, at least thinking, how could I get this guy out of prison and put him and go with him to a non-extradition country and live out the rest of my years on $10 million, you know? And, I mean, heck, I even thought of a scheme to get the guy out, but I never went through with it, obviously. But I mean, but you know, I mean, stuff like that to a normal thinking person that would possibly put their freedom in jeopardy for 10 million bucks, you know, they might try to do that.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I remember, man, I remember so many incidents. Like, I remember that one time they walked out, God, I think they walked out like 10 or 14 staff in like one day. I remember from Coleman, and I remember those guys, they called them, remember the twins? Remember twins?
Yeah.
Those were running drugs in there. I mean, it was just crazy, man. Crazy.
Yeah.
Crazy.
I mean, but it is, man. I mean, for
Mhm.
$2,500, and a lot of them got caught for less.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I mean,
Cell phone.
it's
Just a $100 cell phone. They'd be
that's
going
what I'm
to,
saying.
you know, just crazy. I mean, luckily back in our day there, I mean, we didn't. I don't ever recall like no, I take that back because I remember catching I don't know if I ever told you that I caught Oscar Barat. Remember Barat?
Yeah.
I caught him handing over some cell phones to some inmates inside the captain's office. Yeah.
Really?
Oh man, it's because I was walking down the corridor, a lieutenant's office right there, and I seen his door was open, and I figured, his door's open. I had to ask him a question or something, and I walked in, and he's like, I mean, literally, like he had the phone here, and he's like giving it to the inmate. I was like, whoa, what the hell's going on here? Yeah, man, crazy. And I don't know. Did you ever hear about what happened to that guy?
I can see, I can tell you this with all honesty. I seen with my own eyes that he had a registered number.
Yes, sir.
And I saw that on Sentry. But literally 2 days later,
it's gone.
He was not in the system.
Yeah.
So I don't know whatever happened to him, but I know that he did have a registered number.
I remember when he got that number, I printed it off. I think I probably, like, if I might have like the file still somewhere. I think I still got the Sentry paperwork with his number, with his name and number on there. Because I heard is I heard he disappeared, and then the FBI finally tracked him down in some like mental hospital.
Huh.
I guess he just like lost his shit probably,
Huh.
Yeah.
Well, I can tell you this, not just because me and you are friends and we've known each other for, I don't know what, 17, 18 years, but you were the best lieutenant, not only that I worked for, but you were the best lieutenant that anybody under you worked for. I mean, you are the only true, real officer's lieutenant. And I mean, you held.
I do appreciate that.
Well, it's the truth. I mean, you held everybody to a standard, yes, but you were also fair. And I don't know if you remember this or not. Me and you would ride to work together. Shoot, what was it? 2 years we rode together to work or whatever. But anyway, do you remember one time? And I'll never forget this, man. I still tell people the story. Still tell it because it's hilarious. We were working morning watch, and this guy was brand new. I mean, he'd been there literally one day. I think it was actually his first shift, I think. Anyway, when you first start, you automatically go to the top of the mandate list. And so I was working compound with you, and this was about at 6, 7 o'clock, something like that. You called him up. He was working Echo unit, E unit. And you called him up, you said, hey, man, I got some good news and bad news. And he said, what's that? And you said, well, the good news is you're going to be a little bit richer by the time you leave here. Bad news is, though, I got to mandate you because you're at the top of the list. He was like, all right. And then you said, now you understand what that means, don't you? You have to stay for another shift. He's like, yeah, I got you. Okay, well, anyway, me and you are walking down the corridor out of the lieutenant's office, and we see this guy. I don't know what his name is, but we saw this guy walking with us.
Yeah.
And you looked at him and you said, hey, bud, what are you doing? And he said, well, I'm leaving. And you said, well, you can't leave. You got to stay, man. You got to work a mandated shift. He said, no. I just moved down here to take this job. And the cable guy, he's coming to install my cable. And you, well, I can't help that, dude. You got to go back. And we kept walking with him. And we got there to that last Sally port, if you'll remember.
Yeah.
And you gave the guy 3 chances. 3 chances. I'll never forget it. You said, look, dude, I'm going to tell you for the 3rd time, you got to turn around, go back, go to Echo Unit and work another shift, or I'm going to have to do paperwork on you. He goes, you got to do what you got to do, man.
The cable guy is coming.
Yeah. So we always nicknamed him the cable guy.
The cable guy. Oh, yeah.
The cable guy. I don't know if you remember that or not, but
I remember that. Oh, yeah.
I don't know what.
I want to say he even had like mirrored sunglasses on. He's like in the Sally port. I was like, look.
I mean,
something, man. This is something.
But I never seen that guy ever again. So I don't know whatever happened, but we never seen him again.
I don't think so. Yeah.
I will never, ever forget that, dude. I've told that story numerous times. But yeah, I mean, what lieutenant? Let's be real about this. I've worked with a lot of lieutenants, good and bad. But still, what lieutenant is going to give a probationary guy with 1 or 2 days in the bureau 3 chances to go back? I mean, most lieutenants would have already chewed his ass out, or they would have already, put paperwork on him as soon as they seen him.
Right.
But you're walking with the guy out the front door, and you're literally begging the guy to go back and work. And he had to worry about his cable guy.
He's got to get that cable.
So anyway, but yeah. But you did though, man. You had the respect of everybody under you, man. And I mean, we hated to see you go. I mean, we understand you had to move on for different reasons, but Glenn McDonald is one of the once in a lifetime supervisor lieutenants that you love. And it was a rough time when you weren't there. It wasn't the same anymore,
Yeah, I mean, all the places I worked, I still look back and like I miss quite a few people because I met.
Oh yeah.
I mean, you saw it too. You came across a lot of good people, in some difficult work. So.
No, I came across some people that no matter what, you're going to go to war with them. I mean, you're going to go with war with anybody because that's part of our job.
Right.
But as well as I know that there are some dirt bags, and a lot of those dirt bags that if an inmate gets an extra swing out on them, you kind of, oops, missed that one. And then you take care of business. But you know what I'm saying? And no, it's just, but I will tell you this. Out of all of my 22 years that I did, people ask me all the time. They really do. They said, would you go back and do it again? No, sir. Not at all. I would have found something else to do. It was a great career. It gave me a lifestyle as far as money that most jobs would not allow me to have. I've had a lot of nice things over my life. It's gave me good benefits. It helped me pay bills that I probably couldn't have paid on a normal salary.
Right.
So that's all that's the good things. It's the real good things. But the overall looking back, I wouldn't do it again. And I made it. And that's what I thank God every day is I made it,
Right.
And I got out. I'm 51 now. I've been retired for basically a year, a little over a year. And on my 50th birthday, I walked into human resources at the cab building, turned my paperwork in, and that was it. And I haven't looked back. And I love being retired. Love it. Like, I know you're an hour behind me on your time, but right now it's 4:47, 3:47 your place. we've been sitting here talking for an hour and a half, just rehashing, memories that we got.
Yeah.
But being retired, that's the best part about it, is the government is paying me to stay here at the house to talk to you on the phone. And that's a wonderful, wonderful feeling.
Yep. Hey, just to all right, so to kind of close this out, what type of advice do you have for like the newer people that are starting? I know it's a newer, I mean, you just leaving a year ago and I left what's it, almost 13, 14, well, about 15 months now. I mean, you saw the difference, the huge difference of the newer staff coming in and like the lack of training and everything that was going on. Do you have any advice for anybody to like trying to help them manipulate to get through and survive and do 22 years or 28 years, whatever they're going to do?
Absolutely. But before I tell you, every generation changes.
Mm-hmm.
I remember, when I started in 2000, I had guys that were training me that had been there in the late 70s and the early 80s.
Right.
And, they said the same thing to me that we said to the guys that started, that when we were at our end, boy, this ain't the same BOP. It's totally different. So that's what the reason. Yeah. And that's why I'm hitting on that. Cause like what you just said, how you said things changed at our careers, it changes every generation. The best advice that I could give somebody coming into the BOP now is the first thing you need to do is keep your head down, keep your mouth shut. Don't think that you're a real police, because you're not. You're a correctional officer. And the next thing you need to do is you need to find somebody that's got 8, 10, or 12 years in the BOP that will take you under their wing, and you learn from that person. The guy that I learned from, his name is Jay Drennan. When I met Jay, yes, I was at a medium at Miami, but Jay, he started his career over at Lompoc, and he worked over there for like 15, 16 years. And back in those days, Lompoc was the only penitentiary on the West Coast.
Right.
And Jay had seen 2 or 3 staff killings during his time. Scott Williams was one of them. I don't remember the other guy or the other guys, but Jay was during there when it was bad, the only penitentiary on the West Coast.
Yep.
And the one thing that Jay taught me, if I didn't learn anything, but I did learn this from him, he always carried his radio in his hand. He never ever put his radio on his belt or looped it on his side. He always carried his radio. And I asked him one day, I said, why in the world do you always carry your radio? And he said, because that's the only weapon I got. That could be the difference of me stopping a guy from hurting me or stopping a guy from another staff member. And that might give me an extra second or two to break away from something. And that was something that just, clicked in me. And my whole entire BOP career, I pretty much carried my radio in my hand. Yep. And, of course, nowadays, right when I was getting out, that they were training us on the baton. So I had to get baton training. We went through OC training. They gave us a vest. So, the guys coming up now compared to when we went through, they have a few more weapons to protect them and other staff members. I heard, now I don't know if it's true, I heard they're going to do tasers. I don't know if that's ever going to happen or not, but the best advice, again, is just find somebody that you respect, watch how they interact with the inmates, and try to latch on to them, try to learn their good habits, not their bad habits, but their good habits. And you don't have to be a kiss ass, but just do your job and do the job that you're paid to do and do it to the best you can. And try your best not to take shortcuts, because, one thing that I always took pride in, and I mean this from the bottom of my heart when I say it, and I'm proud of this. In my 22 years I was there, not one time was I ever called into the SIS department as the subject witness. Never once. I tried to always do the right thing. Yes, I can admit that I went to that line, but I never stepped across it. And I take pride in the fact that I never had to go to SIS. Now I had to go to, verify some stuff like we all do, but I never had to go and have to worry about my job. I never had to worry about me going to jail. I take pride in that. So have good ethics, have good work ethics. Another thing, don't be a minute man. And you know what that is when you show up right there at the time you're supposed to relieve your officer. Don't do that. You know, in the military, they always said if you're 15 minutes early, you're still late.
Really?
Get there early enough to where you can relieve that guy because he might be on a double. That guy or girl, they may be going through some personal issues that they need to hurry up and go home to. There's different reasons people need to leave. Mm-hmm. Don't just don't show up or even be late. Don't do that, And so the best advice is just come to work, do the best job you can, and try to survive. Don't do anything criminally wrong. And then do like me and you're doing and let the government pay us to stay at the house.
What are you doing now? Where are you working now?
Nothing. Absolutely doing nothing.
There you go.
My pension's good enough.
Still working out though, right?
Still
working out though, right?
Oh yeah, you're talking about like my personal stuff. Oh yes. I go to the gym 5 or 6 days a week, but at least 5 days. I always say, when you retire, you always have to keep your mind and your body busy, or you'll die. Mm-hmm. And because the rumor is 5 years after we retire, supposedly that's the end of the road for us. And yep. I'm going to do everything I can not to be laying in a casket when I'm 55, 56 years old. I want to live. This is the best part of my life. My son, he's getting ready to make me a granddad. First grandkids coming. I want to be there to see my grandkids. I want to be able to travel. I want to be able to do what I want to do now. I just joined, let's see, the Freemasons. If you know what the Freemasons are, right. I got involved in that. So I'm learning that process. I just got involved Saturday with a motorcycle club, but it's for firemen, law, and military. So it's not a 1%er, but I still ride my Harley as much as I can. Yeah. So I'm getting involved in a motorcycle club, a legit one. I'm going now to about 2 days a week. I go to what's called the senior center because now that I'm over 50, I'm considered a senior citizen. So I go where the old folk club is, and I'm learning how to do stained glass and taking some pottery lessons. I play golf now I don't play it at all because the weather's bad, but when the weather gets good come April, I go out to the golf course about once or twice a month. I'm just living life, man. I'm enjoying life. I'm enjoying it right now.
Good.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
what about you?
That's about it, Brian. So let's we'll talk a little bit more offline. We'll talk about what we were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
We'll do some more episodes. Okay.
I love it, man. This is great. And the last thing I'll just say is whoever's listening, I hope that maybe I could make a difference in your life, because Glenn, you made a difference in my life. So I just hopefully whoever's listening or watching this, maybe they can learn from it and see that there is a light at the end of the tunnel. Mm-hmm. And just good luck to everybody out there.
I appreciate it, Brian. I miss you, man.
I miss you too, and I love you, brother.
Love you too, brother. I'll talk to you soon, all right?
Sounds good, bro.
All right. Bye.